You can fake wealth for one night, but you can't fake class. The crystal chandeliers of the Beaumont Grand Hotel glowed like captured stars above the ballroom, washing the marble floors in gold while servers in black uniforms moved silently through the sea of celebrities, athletes, and billionaire donors arriving for Adrian Kensington's annual charity gala. Outside, camera flashes exploded across the red carpet every few seconds, lighting up designer gowns, diamond necklaces, and forced Hollywood smiles. Inside the private VIP lounge above the ballroom, Adrian leaned lazily against the bar in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo worth more than most people's monthly rent, swirling a glass of whiskey while his closest circle laughed around him. "You know what your problem is?" Vanessa Whitmore said with a smirk, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "You're bored." Adrian gave a faint shrug. "Maybe." "No, seriously," another actor chimed in. "Every year your parties get bigger, your guest list gets richer, and somehow you still look miserable." A few people laughed softly. Adrian only stared down through the glass balcony at the ballroom below. They weren't wrong. Nothing surprised him anymore. Not fame, not beauty, not power, not even the endless parade of people pretending to love him because his last name sat on half the skyscrapers in Manhattan. Vanessa stepped beside him, eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "You know what would actually entertain me," she said. "Watching some random poor girl try surviving this place." Adrian smirked faintly. "That easy." "Please," Vanessa laughed. "A girl from the real world wouldn't last 10 minutes in this room. She'd panic before the appetizers arrived." The group laughed again, but Adrian's eyes drifted downward toward the ballroom entrance below, where hotel staff hurried back and forth carrying trays of champagne beneath the pressure of the arriving celebrity crowd. Then he saw her, a blonde waitress balancing 2 silver trays while trying to avoid a photographer backing carelessly into her path. Simple black uniform, hair loosely tied back, no diamonds, no designer labels, and somehow she looked more real than anyone else in the building. "Her," Adrian said calmly. Vanessa blinked. "What?" "The blonde waitress." The group leaned toward the glass railing curiously. Claire Monroe moved quickly across the ballroom floor, apologizing softly after nearly colliding with a famous singer near the entrance. "That girl." Vanessa laughed loudly. "Oh my God, Adrian, she looks terrified already." Adrian's expression barely changed. "Perfect." Downstairs, Claire adjusted her grip on a champagne tray and exhaled carefully. Her feet already hurt, and the gala hadn't even officially started yet. 12 straight hours on shift. Rent due in 4 days. Her mother's hospital bill sitting unopened inside her purse in the employee locker room downstairs. She glanced briefly toward the massive floral displays lining the ballroom and shook her head softly. Rich people really did live on another planet. "Claire, table 12 needs champagne now." Her manager snapped as he hurried past. "I'm going," she answered quickly. She lifted the tray again and turned sharply around the corner at the exact moment someone stepped into her path. The collision happened instantly. Crystal glasses tilted. Golden champagne splashed across a black tuxedo jacket. The ballroom seemed to freeze. Claire's breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God." Her face went pale immediately as the tray rattled in her trembling hands. Slowly, she looked up. Adrian Kensington stared down at the stains spreading across his tuxedo in complete silence while several nearby guests gasped under their breath. Claire recognized him instantly. Everybody did. Billionaire, media king. America's favorite ruthless bachelor. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, voice shaking. "I didn't see you, sir. I swear I can clean it." One of the event coordinators rushed over looking horrified. "Claire, what did you do?" Vanessa appeared seconds later beside Adrian, already smiling cruelly. "Well," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "I guess somebody's getting fired before dessert." A few celebrities snickered quietly. Claire's stomach dropped. She lowered her eyes, humiliated. But Adrian kept staring at her for another long second. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, like a man suddenly struck by an interesting idea. "What's your name?" he asked calmly. Claire blinked. Claire. Adrian glanced briefly toward Vanessa and the others watching nearby, then back at the frightened waitress standing in front of him. Tell me something, Claire, he said softly. Do you think a girl like you could survive a room like this if everyone was actually watching? Claire frowned slightly, confused. I don't understand. Adrian reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a sleek black invitation card, and handed it to her. Tomorrow night, he said. Same ballroom. Different dress code. Claire stared at the card in disbelief. Vanessa burst out laughing beside him. Oh, this is going to be fun. Adrian's eyes never left Claire's face. Come as my guest, he said quietly. Let's see if elegance can really be learned, or if people are simply born with it. Claire stared at the black invitation card long after Adrian Kensington disappeared back into the crowd of celebrities and flashing cameras. The thick paper felt expensive between her fingers, embossed with silver lettering that reflected the ballroom lights. Kensington Foundation Winter Gala. Guest of Adrian Kensington. Her heart still hammered painfully in her chest. Around her, whispers spread like wildfire among the staff. Did you see that? One bartender murmured. Why would he invite her? Another asked quietly. Vanessa Whitmore smirked as she passed Claire on the way toward the VIP elevators. Careful tomorrow night, she said sweetly. Those people eat girls like you alive. Then she walked away, laughing softly with her entourage. Claire swallowed hard. Suddenly her black waitress uniform felt smaller somehow, like everyone in the ballroom could see straight through it. Her manager stormed over seconds later. What was that? He hissed under his breath. Do you realize how lucky you are he did not demand your termination? Claire quickly lowered her eyes. I said I was sorry. Sorry does not cover champagne on a $50,000 tuxedo. He grabbed another tray from her hands sharply. Finish your shift downstairs. Away from the guests. Claire nodded silently and walked toward the service hallway while heat burned across her cheeks. But even as humiliation twisted in her stomach, she could still feel Adrian's eyes on her. Calm, amused, curious, like she was not a person at all, like she was a game he had suddenly decided to play. 3 hours later, Claire finally stepped out of the hotel employee entrance into the freezing Manhattan night. Wind rushed between the buildings, biting through her thin coat while yellow taxi lights blurred across the wet streets. She rubbed her hands together and started walking toward the subway station, exhausted. Her phone buzzed inside her pocket. St. Anne's Medical Center. Her stomach tightened instantly. Hello. Miss Monroe, the nurse asked gently. Your mother's insurance authorization has still not gone through. We're going to need another payment extension by Friday. Claire closed her eyes. Friday. Rent was due Thursday morning. She looked up at the glowing skyline around her. Millions of dollars floating above her in glass towers while she counted subway fare and overdue bills. Understand, she whispered softly. I will figure something out. By the time she reached her apartment building in Queens, it was nearly midnight. The old radiator inside her tiny studio rattled loudly as she stepped in. Paintings and unfinished sketches covered nearly every wall. Charcoal portraits, city streets, strangers on subway trains. Pieces she never had time to finish because real life always arrived before dreams could. Claire dropped her bag onto the floor and sat heavily at the small kitchen table. Then slowly, she pulled Adrian's invitation card from her coat pocket again. Same ballroom, different dress code. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Billionaires did not invite girls like her anywhere unless they wanted entertainment. She already knew how tomorrow night would go. Wealthy people pretending to be polite while quietly mocking her clothes, her accent, the way she held a wine glass. Girls like Vanessa waiting for her to embarrass herself publicly. She tossed the invitation onto the table. Absolutely not, she muttered. But then her eyes drifted toward the unpaid hospital statement sitting beside the sink. $6,400. Her chest tightened. The next morning, Claire barely slept 2 hours before returning to the hotel for another shift. The Beaumont Grand looked even more chaotic than usual. Florists carried towering white roses across the lobby, while photographers prepared lighting equipment near the red carpet entrance. Celebrity assistants rushed through the hallways, clutching designer garment bags and jewelry cases. Claire kept her head down all morning. But just after noon, the front desk manager approached her with a strange expression. "Claire, yes, there's a car waiting outside for you." She frowned. "What? A driver?" He glanced awkwardly toward the revolving doors. "And apparently a stylist." Claire blinked in confusion before stepping cautiously outside onto the busy Manhattan sidewalk. A long black Rolls-Royce sat parked directly at the curb, while pedestrians slowed to stare. Standing beside, it was an elegant woman in a cream-colored coat holding several garment bags. "Claire Monroe?" the woman asked politely. Claire nodded slowly. "Mr. Kensington requested that I prepare you for tonight." Claire immediately shook her head. "No, there has been some mistake." "No mistake." The stylist smiled faintly. "Mr. Kensington was very specific." Claire looked past her toward the tinted car windows. This was insane. She should walk away immediately. But before she could speak again, her phone buzzed once more. Another message from the hospital billing department. Final reminder before treatment delay. Her stomach dropped. The city noise around her suddenly felt distant. Slowly, Claire looked back at the waiting car, then at the garment bags filled with dresses she could never afford in 10 lifetimes. Somewhere high above Manhattan, inside one of those glass towers, Adrian Kensington was probably already laughing at how predictable this all was. But Claire surprised even herself when she quietly whispered, "What exactly does he expect me to wear?" Claire had never sat inside a Rolls-Royce before. The leather seats smelled expensive. Soft jazz played quietly through. Hidden speakers, and Manhattan slid past the tinted windows like a different universe entirely. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap while the elegant stylist across from her studied fabric samples and jewelry catalogs on a tablet. "Mr. Kensington requested timeless," the woman said thoughtfully. "Not flashy. Understated elegance." Claire almost laughed softly at the phrase. Understated elegance probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Outside, Fifth Avenue glowed beneath the gray winter sky, while shoppers hurried past luxury storefronts carrying bags worth half her paycheck. Everything about this felt unreal. "You do know this is a mistake, right?" Claire asked quietly after several minutes. The stylist glanced up politely. "Excuse me, I do not belong at some billionaire gala." She looked down at her worn sneakers. "People like Adrian Kensington do not invite girls like me unless there is a reason." The stylist hesitated briefly before offering a careful smile. "Mr. Kensington rarely does anything without a reason." That answer somehow made Claire feel worse. 30 minutes later, the car stopped outside an exclusive private atelier overlooking Central Park. Claire stepped inside and immediately froze. Cream-colored marble floors stretched beneath crystal chandeliers, while mannequins wearing couture gowns stood beneath glowing spotlights like museum pieces. Two assistants rushed forward, carrying measuring tapes and garment bags. "This way, Miss Monroe." Claire instinctively stepped back. "Wait, I cannot afford any of this." "It is already paid for," the stylist assured her gently. "Everything." Claire swallowed hard. Nothing about this felt generous. It felt calculated, like someone building a version of her for entertainment. For the next 4 hours, strangers transformed her piece by piece. Her hair was softened into loose, golden waves. Her makeup remained natural, but polished enough to make her barely recognize herself in the mirror. Dress after dress appeared around her in clouds of silk and satin, while assistants adjusted hems and jewelry under bright, white lights. Claire stayed mostly silent through all of it, but while the stylists whispered excitedly around her, she quietly pulled a small sketchbook from her bag whenever no one noticed. Quick pencil strokes filled the pages. A tired seamstress adjusting fabric with pins between her lips. A delivery driver asleep in his van outside the boutique window. A young assistant nervously practicing her smile in the mirror before entering the showroom again. "You draw?" one assistant asked suddenly, startling Claire. She quickly closed the sketchbook. "Just sometimes." But before the assistant could say anything else, the boutique doors opened again. The room immediately shifted. Staff straightened. Conversation softened. Adrian Kensington stepped inside, wearing a charcoal overcoat over his dark suit, while snowflakes melted slowly in his hair. Claire looked up instinctively and froze slightly when his eyes landed on her across the room. For one brief second, Adrian said nothing at all. The fitted midnight blue gown, the soft curls framing her face, the quiet nervousness still visible in her posture, somehow made her stand out more than any celebrity he had brought to this gala before. Not polished enough to seem fake. Not arrogant enough to blend into his world. Real. Adrian recovered first. Looks like they succeeded, he said calmly. Claire crossed her arms lightly. At what? Convincing Manhattan you belong in expensive places. His tone carried the same cool amusement as before, but something quieter lingered beneath it now. Claire met his gaze directly. And if they cannot, Adrian smirked faintly. Then tonight should be entertaining. One stylist nervously laughed. Claire did not. She walked toward the mirror again, staring at the unfamiliar woman reflected back at her. The gown hugged her frame elegantly, without looking excessive. A thin silver necklace rested against her collarbone. Beautiful. Sophisticated. Temporary. You still think this is funny, do you not? She asked softly without turning around. Adrian slipped his hands into his pockets. I think people reveal who they really are under pressure. Claire looked at him through the reflection in the mirror. Including you? For the first time since entering the boutique, Adrian's expression shifted slightly. Not anger. Surprise. Like nobody usually spoke to him that way. Before he could answer, Vanessa Whitmore suddenly swept into the showroom wearing oversized sunglasses and a white fur coat, despite the indoor heat. Adrian, she called sweetly before finally noticing Claire beside the mirror. Her smile sharpened instantly. Oh, her eyes traveled slowly over Claire's dress. Interesting choice. Claire recognized that tone immediately. The same tone wealthy women used whenever they wanted someone to feel small without saying anything openly cruel. Vanessa stepped closer and tilted her head. You clean up better than expected. Claire smiled politely. Thank you. Vanessa glanced toward Adrian with amusement sparkling in her eyes. This is going to destroy social media tonight. Then she leaned slightly closer to Claire and lowered her voice just enough. Just one piece of advice. Do not confuse being invited with actually belonging. The room fell quiet again. Claire felt the sting of embarrassment rise inside her chest. But instead of looking away, she calmly reached for her sketchbook from the chair nearby. Vanessa frowned slightly. What is that? Claire flipped to the latest page and held it out gently. A perfect pencil sketch of the boutique assistant, nervously fixing her smile in the mirror moments earlier, stared back from the paper. Delicate, human, honest. Everyone nearby immediately leaned closer in surprise. You drew that just now? One stylist whispered. Claire nodded lightly. Vanessa's expression tightened almost invisibly. Adrian stared at the sketch longer than anyone else. Then slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted. Because for the first time all day, the girl he invited as a joke had just become the most interesting person in the room. By 7 o'clock that evening, the Beaumont Grand Hotel no longer looked like a hotel at all. It looked like another planet. Massive spotlights swept across the Manhattan skyline, while luxury cars lined the entrance for nearly an entire block. Paparazzi shouted celebrity names from behind velvet barriers as cameras flashed non-stop beneath the falling snow. Inside the waiting limousine, Claire stared nervously through the tinted window at the chaos outside. Her hands rested tightly around the small silver clutch on her lap while her sketchbook remained hidden carefully inside it. Adrian sat across from her in silence, scrolling through messages on his phone as though this entire spectacle bored him. Claire glanced toward him briefly. You really do this often? Adrian did not look up. Do what? Turn human beings into entertainment. That finally made him pause. Slowly, he lifted his eyes toward her. You still think tonight is about humiliating you? Claire gave a quiet laugh without humor. Is it not? Adrian studied her face for a moment before slipping the phone back into his pocket. You're still here. Because hospitals do not accept pride as payment. For the first time all evening, Adrian had no clever response ready. The car stopped outside the entrance before he could answer. Instantly, the muffled roar of photographers exploded outside the vehicle. Claire's stomach tightened painfully. "No," she whispered softly under her breath. Adrian stepped out first while camera flashes burst violently around him. "Adrian, over here. Who is your date tonight? Is Vanessa inside already?" Then the chauffeur opened Claire's door. Everything froze for half a second. Claire hesitated before slowly stepping onto the red carpet in her midnight blue gown, while hundreds of camera flashes immediately lit up around her like lightning. The cold winter air hit her skin sharply. People stared openly, not because she was famous, because nobody recognized her. Who is she? Is she an actress? Model? No idea. Claire fought the urge to turn around and run straight back into the car. Adrian offered his arm casually beside her. "Relax," he murmured quietly. "You look terrified." Claire forced herself to breathe before placing her hand lightly against his arm. "That is because your world looks terrifying." Together, they stepped into the ballroom while strings from a live orchestra floated softly through the golden air above hundreds of glittering guests. Crystal glasses clinked beneath towering chandeliers while celebrities posed beside. Giant floral sculptures for photographers roaming the room. Claire instantly felt the shift, eyes following her everywhere, measuring her, judging her. Women in couture gowns smiled too politely. Men in designer tuxedos glanced at her curiously before whispering to one another. Adrian noticed all of it, and strangely, he also noticed that Claire never pretended to be someone else. She looked nervous, yes, but not desperate, not fake. Almost everyone in that room performed constantly for attention. Claire simply observed quietly, like an artist studying a painting. Adrian, a famous actor, greeted loudly while approaching them with champagne in hand. "You never told us your mystery guest was gorgeous." Claire smiled politely. "That usually means someone is about to insult me." The actor blinked before laughing awkwardly. Adrian smirked slightly beside her. Minutes later, the games truly began. At a large marble table near the ballroom center, several socialites invited Claire to join them with smiles that looked sweet from a distance and poisonous up close. Vanessa sat directly in the middle, wearing diamonds that sparkled beneath the chandeliers. "Claire," Vanessa said warmly, "we were just discussing travel. What is your favorite resort in St. Tropez?" A few women hid amused smiles behind their champagne glasses. Claire calmly reached for sparkling water instead of champagne. "I have never been." Vanessa tilted her head sympathetically. "Oh," another woman leaned forward. "Aspen, then?" "Never there, either." "Paris Fashion Week." Claire smiled faintly. "Closest I've been to Paris is the movie Ratatouille." Several people laughed unexpectedly at that. Vanessa's smile tightened. "Well," she said smoothly, "at least you are honest." Claire set her glass down carefully. "Most people here are not." The table went quiet instantly. Adrian nearly choked on his whiskey across the room after overhearing the exchange. Instead of shrinking beneath their judgment, Claire somehow kept disarming people with honesty. A famous football player soon joined the conversation and asked casually, "So what do you actually do?" Vanessa smirked before Claire could answer. "That depends. What was your title before tonight?" Claire looked directly at her. "Waitress." Silence flickered across the table. Then, unexpectedly, the football player grinned. "Honestly? Respect. That job looks harder than anything happening in this room." A few guests laughed softly in agreement. Vanessa's expression darkened another shade. The strange thing was happening faster now. People kept gathering near Claire, not because she tried impressing anyone, but because she listened when others spoke. She remembered names. She asked genuine questions instead of rehearsed celebrity small talk. And slowly, almost invisibly, the energy of the ballroom began shifting toward her. Adrian watched from across the room, while Claire laughed softly beside a famous singer discussing old subway musicians in Brooklyn. She looked completely different from the frightened waitress who spilled champagne on him 24 hours earlier. No, not different. The same girl, just finally visible. And for the first time that night, Adrian realized something dangerous. He was no longer watching her because the bed amused him. He was watching because he could not seem to look away. By 9:30, the ballroom had transformed into something almost surreal. Gold light shimmered across hundreds of crystal glasses while conversations rose and fell beneath the orchestra's soft music like waves rolling through the room. Waiters floated between celebrities carrying silver trays of champagne and tiny desserts that looked too beautiful to eat. Yet somehow, despite the famous actors, billionaire investors, and social media icons filling the Beaumont Grand Hotel, the attention inside the room kept drifting back toward Claire Monroe. Adrian noticed it everywhere now. A famous talk show host laughing harder at Claire's quiet jokes than anything his own celebrity friends said all evening. An older billionaire couple speaking warmly with her near the marble staircase. Even members of the hotel staff smiling when she passed by, because unlike everyone else in the ballroom, she actually thanked them. "This is becoming a problem," Vanessa muttered sharply beside Adrian while watching Claire from across the room. Adrian sipped his whiskey calmly. "You sound jealous." Vanessa let out a cold laugh. "Of a waitress?" But her eyes never left Claire. Near the ballroom center, Claire stood beside a massive ice sculpture while speaking with an elderly museum director about charcoal sketching techniques. For the first time all night, she had almost forgotten she was being watched. Almost. Then a sound of raised voices suddenly cut through the music nearby. "Please, sir, I am supposed to play during the dessert reception," a nervous young voice pleaded softly. Claire turned immediately toward the commotion unfolding near the ballroom side entrance. A teenage violinist stood clutching a worn instrument case while two security guards blocked his path. His black suit looked slightly too large for him, sleeves hanging awkwardly near his wrists. "Your name is not on the updated guest performer list," one guard said firmly. "You need to leave the event area." "But they call me this afternoon," the boy insisted desperately. "My mother already drove 2 hours from Connecticut." Guests nearby barely glanced over before returning to their conversations. Just another invisible worker causing inconvenience during an expensive evening. Claire frowned softly. Something about the boy's expression hit her immediately. The embarrassment, the panic, the feeling of standing inside a room full of powerful people while realizing nobody actually sees you. She stepped forward before thinking twice. "Excuse me," she said gently. The guards looked surprised. "Is there a problem?" One guard sighed politely. "Private event issue, ma'am." Claire glanced toward the violinist. "What is your name?" "Eli." "How old are you, Eli?" 17. His fingers tightened nervously around the violin case. "I won a youth music competition last month. They invited me to perform tonight." One guard shook his head. There was a scheduling change. Claire looked around the ballroom. Hundreds of wealthy guests discussing art, charity, and culture beneath million-dollar chandeliers, while a frightened teenager stood seconds away from being quietly removed from the room. "Then let him play," she said simply. The guards exchanged awkward looks. "That decision is above us." Claire hesitated only a second before gently taking the violin case from Eli's hand herself. Then maybe nobody should have invited a musician to a charity gala if they planned on treating him like a problem. Several nearby guests turned toward her now. The tension in the room shifted instantly. One guard lowered his voice. "Ma'am, please do not make this difficult." Claire ignored him completely. Instead, she opened the violin case carefully and handed the instrument back to Eli with a small, encouraging smile. "Play anyway. Eli dlinker in disteliet." "Here, right here." The ballroom conversations slowly softened as Claire guided the nervous teenager toward the center of the marble floor beneath the crystal chandeliers. Somewhere across the room, Adrian straightened immediately when he realized what was happening. "What is she doing?" Vanessa whispered sharply, but nobody answered, because suddenly the orchestra itself had stopped playing. Eli swallowed hard before lifting the violin beneath his chin with trembling hands. The first notes drifted softly into the ballroom. Delicate, beautiful, raw, and within seconds, the entire room fell silent. Claire sat down quietly on a marble staircase nearby while Eli played, her midnight blue gown spilling softly around her like dark water beneath the golden lights. She listened with complete focus, smiling gently whenever his confidence grew stronger through the music. No performance, no social climbing, no pretending, just kindness. Adrian stared at her from across the ballroom and felt something unfamiliar tighten painfully in his chest. Because every celebrity in that room had spent years learning how to command attention. Claire had done it simply by caring about someone nobody else noticed. Phones slowly lowered. Conversations stopped completely. Even hotel staff paused to listen. And for the first time all evening, the Beaumont Grand no longer felt like a billionaire playground. It felt human. Eli finished the final note, trembling slightly before lowering the violin. Then something extraordinary happened. The ballroom erupted into applause. Real applause. Not the polite, fake, kind, wealthy people used all night long. Genuine. Warm. Loud enough to echo against the chandeliers overhead. Eli's eyes filled instantly with shocked emotion. Claire stood first, clapping proudly while smiling at him like he mattered. Adrian could not stop staring at her. Not because she looked beautiful. She did. But because somewhere between the flashing cameras and expensive champagne, Claire Monroe had accidentally become the soul of the entire room. And deep down, Adrian realized the most dangerous part of all. He no longer wanted to embarrass her. He wanted her to keep looking at him the same way she looked at everyone else. The applause lingered long after Eli lowered his violin. Guests who had spent the entire evening pretending to care about charity suddenly looked uncomfortable, as though Claire Monroe had quietly exposed something hollow beneath all the diamonds and expensive speeches. Eli stood frozen near the ballroom staircase, overwhelmed by the standing ovation while tears glimmered in his eyes. Claire stepped toward him first, smiling warmly as she handed the violin back carefully. "You were incredible," she whispered. "Do not let anybody make you feel invisible again." Eli nodded quickly, unable to speak. Nearby, several guests suddenly wanted photos with him. The same people who ignored him 10 minutes earlier now praised his raw talent, loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Claire noticed the shift immediately and quietly looked away. Adrian noticed that too. He crossed the ballroom slowly toward her while conversations resumed softly around them. "You changed the entire room," he said once he reached her side. Claire glanced toward the crowd surrounding Eli. "No, he did." Adrian studied her face beneath the chandelier light. "Most people in this world only care about what benefits them." Claire gave a faint smile. "That sounds lonely." The words landed harder than Adrian expected. Before he could answer, Vanessa suddenly appeared beside them, holding a champagne glass too tightly between manicured fingers. "The internet is obsessed with her already," she said coldly while showing Adrian her phone screen. Photos of Claire sitting beside Eli during the performance were already spreading online beneath captions calling her the mystery girl at the Kensington Gala. Thousands of comments poured in by the second. "She looks more elegant than the celebrities. Who is she?" Finally, somebody real at one of these events. Vanessa locked her jaw. "Congratulations," she said flatly to Claire. "You managed to become Manhattan's favorite charity project overnight." Claire's expression softened slightly with disappointment rather than anger. "You really think kindness is a performance, do you not?" Vanessa laughed quietly. "Please, nobody stays poor unless they are waiting for someone rich to rescue them." Adrian's eyes darkened instantly. "Enough, Vanessa." She blinked in surprise. Adrian never corrected her publicly. Vanessa forced another smile, but the tension around her eyes sharpened. "I was joking." "No," Claire said softly. "You were trying to make sure I remembered where I came from." Silence stretched briefly between them before Vanessa finally walked away toward the ballroom bar, clearly furious. Adrian exhaled slowly and loosened his tie slightly. "You handled that better than most people in this room would." Claire looked around the glittering ballroom. "That is because most people in this room are terrified all the time." Adrian frowned faintly. Terrified of what? Losing attention, losing status, losing whatever version of themselves they worked so hard to sell. Her eyes met his directly. It must be exhausting. Adrian stared at her quietly for several seconds. Nobody spoke to him this way. Not investors. Not celebrities. Not women trying to impress him. Claire did not seem afraid of offending him because she genuinely expected nothing from him. Somehow that made every conversation feel painfully honest. An hour later, the gala finally began winding down. Guests slowly drifted toward private after-parties while snow continued falling heavily beyond the hotel windows. Claire stood near the entrance waiting for her coat when Adrian approached again. "Come with me," he said calmly. Claire blinked. "Where?" "Food. At midnight." Adrian smirked faintly. "Believe it or not, billionaires eat too." 20 minutes later, Claire sat across from Adrian inside a tiny diner in Brooklyn beneath flickering neon lights, while an old jukebox played softly near the counter. The place smelled like coffee and grilled onions instead of expensive perfume and champagne. Claire stared around the diner in disbelief. "This feels illegal somehow," she admitted. Adrian loosened his tuxedo jacket slightly. "What is seeing you somewhere normal?" A tired waitress poured coffee into their mugs before recognizing Adrian and nearly dropping the pot. "Oh my God," she whispered. Adrian only smiled politely. "Can we get 2 cheeseburgers?" The waitress nodded quickly and hurried away. Claire laughed softly under her breath. "You know she's going to tell everyone about this tomorrow." "Probably." For the first time all night, Adrian looked relaxed. "No cameras. No investors. No pretending." Snow drifted slowly outside the diner windows while silence settled comfortably between them. Then, unexpectedly, Adrian spoke first. "My father used to test people constantly." Claire looked up. Adrian stared down into his coffee. "Employees. Friends. Girlfriends. He believed loyalty only existed when money disappeared." Claire listened quietly. "When I was 12, he took me to one of his hotels in Chicago and made me pretend to be the son of a janitor for an entire weekend." Claire frowned softly. "Why?" Adrian laughed, once without humor. "Because he wanted to see how quickly wealthy people would stop respecting me." "And did they?" Adrian looked out the snowy window. Immediately, something in his voice shifted then. Not arrogance. Hurt. Old hurt. Claire studied him carefully before speaking. People who spend their lives humiliating others usually learned that behavior somewhere painful. Adrian slowly turned back toward her. Claire's voice remained soft. "You do not invite strangers into cruel games unless some part of you is still angry at the world." The diner suddenly felt very quiet. Adrian stared at her across the table while snow covered the Brooklyn streets outside in white silence. And for the first time in years, someone was looking at Adrian Kensington. Without fear, greed, or admiration, just understanding, which somehow felt far more dangerous. Snow fell harder over Manhattan by the time Adrian's driver pulled up outside Claire's apartment building in Queens. The old brick complex looked fragile beneath the pale streetlights, nothing like the towering glass penthouses Adrian usually entered at night. Claire stepped out of the car slowly, her midnight blue gown hidden beneath Adrian's wool coat, while cold wind swept through the empty street. For a brief second, neither of them moved. The city sounded quieter here. Distant sirens, subway tracks rattling somewhere far away, a couple arguing softly across the street. Real life. Adrian glanced up at the building. "You live here?" Claire folded her arms lightly against the cold. "Do not sound so shocked." "I'm not shocked." She gave him a look. Adrian exhaled faintly. "Fine. Maybe a little." Claire laughed softly for the first time since leaving the diner. The sound lingered between them longer than expected. Then her expression softened again. "Thank you for tonight." Adrian studied her face carefully beneath the falling snow. Even the beginning, Claire hesitated. "No honesty." "Always honesty." Adrian almost smiled. "Fair enough." They stood there another second while snowflakes collected slowly in Claire's hair. Somewhere deep inside himself, Adrian realized something uncomfortable. He did not want the night to end. He had spent years surrounded by beautiful women, polished conversations, and carefully curated relationships. Yet somehow this exhausted waitress from Queens made him feel more awake than any of them ever had. Claire stepped backward toward the apartment entrance. "Good night, Adrian." "Claire." She paused. Adrian looked at her quietly before speaking. "I meant what I said earlier." "About what?" "People revealing themselves under pressure." Claire tilted her head slightly. Adrian's voice lowered. "You revealed something good." For the first time all night, Claire looked genuinely caught off guard. Before she could answer, her phone suddenly buzzed inside her clutch. She glanced down instinctively. Then her face changed immediately. The warmth vanished from her expression. "What is it?" Adrian asked. Claire stared at the screen silently for a moment. "Hospital billing office. Final notice before treatment suspension." Her chest tightened painfully. Reality returning all at once. The gala, the dresses, the chandeliers. None of it belonged to her world. She slipped the phone away quickly. "Nothing." Adrian frowned slightly, unconvinced. But before he could ask again, headlights suddenly swept across the street behind them. Another black luxury vehicle stopped sharply near the curb. Claire turned in confusion just as Vanessa Whitmore stepped out wearing a white cashmere coat and an icy smile. Adrian's expression darkened instantly. "Vanessa," he said flatly, "what are you doing here?" "Saving you from making a mistake." She walked toward them confidently despite the snow. Claire immediately sensed danger in the tension between them. Vanessa held a sleek tablet tightly against her side. "I warned you earlier," she said coldly to Claire. "But apparently you enjoy attention too much to listen." Adrian stepped forward. "Enough." But Vanessa ignored him completely. "Do you know what everybody at the after-party is laughing about right now?" she asked Claire softly. Claire stayed silent. Vanessa tapped the tablet screen once before turning it toward her. A video began playing instantly. Adrian's private VIP lounge from the night before. Champagne glasses. Celebrity laughter. Adrian leaning casually against the bar. Then his own voice filled the cold street air clearly. "Fine. I will bring a random poor girl tomorrow. You will see how fast she breaks." Claire froze completely. The color drained from her face. Vanessa watched her carefully. "That was before he chose you downstairs." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" Vanessa snapped. "The entire after-party has already seen it." Claire stared silently at the screen while pieces of the last 24 hours suddenly rearranged themselves into something crueler than she imagined. The invitation, the whispers, the cameras, the strange amusement in Adrian's eyes that first night. She had never been a guest. She had been entertainment. Adrian stepped toward her immediately. "Claire, listen to me." But she slowly backed away from him. Hurt spread across her face so quietly it somehow looked worse than anger. "It was a bet," she whispered. Adrian opened his mouth, but no words came fast enough. Because it had been a bet. At the beginning. And now he suddenly hated himself for ever thinking it was harmless. Snow continued falling heavily around them, while the city blurred silver beneath the streetlights. Vanessa folded her arms coldly. "Did you really think billionaires invite waitresses into their world for no reason?" Claire's eyes filled, but she refused to let the tears fall. Adrian took another step toward her desperately. "Claire, it changed after that." "After what?" she asked softly. "After you realized I could entertain your friends longer than expected?" The words hit harder than any public humiliation Adrian had ever experienced. Claire slowly slipped off the elegant designer heels she had worn all evening and set them carefully on the snowy sidewalk beside the limousine. Then she handed Adrian's wool coat back to him. "You know the worst part?" she said quietly. Adrian stared at her helplessly. Claire's voice trembled only slightly. "For a few hours tonight, I almost forgot which world I belonged to." Then before Adrian could stop her, Claire turned and walked barefoot through the falling snow toward her apartment building while the midnight blue gown disappeared slowly into the storm. And for the first time in years, Adrian Kensington stood completely powerless on a cold New York street, realizing the woman he was never supposed to care about had just walked away, carrying the only honest thing left inside him. For the next 3 days, Adrian Kensington became the most hated billionaire on the internet. Every major entertainment outlet replayed the leaked video non-stop beside photos of Claire Monroe standing beneath the Beaumont Grand chandeliers. Headlines exploded across social media. Billionaire humiliates waitress for entertainment. Mystery gala girl betrayed by Manhattan elite. Even people who normally worship celebrity culture looked disgusted by the footage. Adrian sat alone, inside his penthouse office, watching the storm spread across every screen in silence. His public relations team talked endlessly around him about damage control, reputation management, and legal responses against Vanessa Whitmore for leaking the footage. Adrian barely heard any of it, because none of them understood the real problem. The real problem was Claire's face when she realized the truth. "We need to release a statement immediately," his assistant insisted nervously. "The board is already panicking." Adrian stared out the floor to ceiling windows at Manhattan below. "Cancel my interviews this week." "Sir, that will make things worse." "Do it anyway." Across the city, Claire sat quietly beside her mother's hospital bed while rain tapped softly against the windows outside. The expensive gala gown was gone. The makeup washed away. She wore old jeans and a gray sweater again while sketching absent-mindedly in the corner of her notebook. But something inside her had changed. She no longer felt embarrassed. She felt tired. Her mother glanced toward the sketchbook gently. "You stopped drawing faces." Claire looked down. Her recent pages showed empty subway stations, rainy sidewalks, abandoned coffee cups. Lonelier drawings somehow. "I guess I got distracted." Her mother smiled faintly. "By the handsome billionaire?" Claire let out a quiet laugh despite herself. He was never real. But even as she said it, part of her remembered the diner in Brooklyn. The way Adrian looked when he talked about his father. The silence between them in the snow. None of that felt fake, which somehow hurt worse. Meanwhile, Adrian finally did something nobody expected. On Thursday morning, he walked directly into a live interview at Manhattan Morning Report without informing his own public relations team first. The studio producers nearly panicked when he arrived unannounced. Millions tuned in immediately. Adrian sat beneath harsh studio lights wearing a plain dark suit with no arrogance left in his posture. The host barely hid her skepticism. "Mr. Kensington, people are calling your behavior toward Claire Monroe cruel and humiliating. Was she invited to your gala as part of a joke?" Adrian looked directly into the camera. "Yes." The studio went silent. "At first," he continued quietly, "and that is something I am deeply ashamed of." Across New York, people stopped watching breakfast television casually and started paying attention. Adrian's voice remained calm, but painfully honest. "I grew up around people who treated kindness like weakness. Somewhere along the way, I became one of them." The host blinked, surprised by the sincerity. "And Claire Monroe?" Adrian exhaled softly. "Claire walked into a room full of wealthy people pretending to matter and reminded all of us what actual character looks like." Clips from the interview spread across social media instantly. But Adrian was not finished yet. 2 days later, invitations began arriving across Manhattan for an entirely new event hosted by the Kensington Foundation. The Real Stars Gala. No celebrity performances. No influencer guest list. No red carpet interviews. Instead, the invitation honored teachers, nurses, firefighters, subway workers, artists, immigrant families, and community volunteers from across New York City. Most shocking of all, every major celebrity who usually attended Adrian's events discovered they were not invited. Vanessa Whitmore nearly exploded publicly after learning she had been removed from multiple Kensington brand partnerships entirely. "He is destroying his own social empire over a waitress," one gossip columnist whispered on television. But Adrian no longer cared, because for the first time in years, he finally understood something Claire had seen immediately. His world had become empty long before she entered it. On the night of the new gala, the Beaumont Grand Ballroom looked completely different. No paparazzi barriers outside. No giant sponsor logos. No social media livestreams. Instead, local musicians played jazz softly near the entrance while community art covered the marble walls where luxury advertisements usually hung. Nurses arrived in simple dresses beside exhausted teachers and small business owners. Real laughter filled the ballroom instead of rehearsed networking smiles. Then came the final surprise. Near the ballroom center stood a massive, private art exhibit beneath soft golden lights. Guests gathered around quietly, studying charcoal sketches displayed carefully along white gallery walls. Subway passengers sleeping after long shifts. Elderly couples holding hands on park benches. Waitresses carrying heavy trays beneath tired eyes. Human moments most wealthy people never even noticed. At the center of the exhibit, elegant silver lettering read only 4 words. The Art of Claire Monroe. Adrienne stood alone near the staircase, watching guests admire her work one by one. Some smiled softly. Others wiped tears quietly after recognizing themselves in the drawings. Because Claire had somehow done the impossible. She made ordinary people look worthy of being remembered. Then suddenly, the ballroom entrance fell silent. Adrienne slowly looked up. Claire stood there frozen beneath the chandeliers, wearing a simple dark green dress she clearly chose herself. No designer labels. No diamonds. Just quiet elegance. Her eyes moved slowly from the crowded ballroom to the gallery walls filled entirely with her sketches. And when she finally looked toward Adrienne across the room, his chest tightened painfully. Because in that moment, more than money, reputation, or power, Adrienne Kensington wanted only one thing. For Claire Monroe to believe him when he said he was finally trying to become someone worthy of standing beside her. The ballroom remained silent as Claire Monroe slowly walked farther into the gallery exhibit, her eyes moving carefully across every sketch mounted beneath the warm golden lights. Around her stood teachers, nurses, subway workers, delivery drivers, and ordinary New Yorkers dressed in simple suits and modest dresses instead of designer labels and diamonds. Yet somehow the room felt more elegant than the celebrity galas she had attended days earlier. Because for the first time, nobody here was pretending to matter. They simply did. Claire stopped in front of a charcoal drawing of an exhausted waitress balancing 2 heavy trays beneath dim restaurant lights. The lines were rough in places, unfinished near the edges. She remembered drawing it after a 14-hour shift while eating instant noodles. Beside her apartment window, beside the frame, hung a small silver plaque. For every invisible person who kept the city alive while nobody was looking. Claire's throat tightened instantly. "You kept them all," she whispered softly. Adrienne stood several feet behind her, hands resting quietly in his pockets. "Every sketch I could find." Claire slowly turned toward him. "Ow!" Adrienne almost smiled faintly. "You left your sketchbook behind in the limousine that night." For a second, neither of them spoke. Soft jazz drifted through the ballroom, while guests continued admiring her artwork nearby. But Claire barely noticed any of it now, because Adrienne no longer looked like the untouchable billionaire from the Beaumont Grand balcony. He looked tired, nervous even, like a man standing without armor for the first time in his life. "You should have asked before displaying them," Claire said quietly. "You are right. No excuse, no arrogance, just honesty." Adrienne stepped slightly closer. "I spent most of my life believing power came from controlling how people saw me." His eyes drifted briefly across the ballroom. "Then you walked into my world and made me realize I built that world around the wrong things." Claire folded her arms lightly, emotion flickering behind her guarded expression. "Adrienne," no, his voice remained calm but firm. "Please let me say this correctly for once." The entire ballroom seemed softer somehow beneath the chandeliers as Adrienne looked directly at her. "The night I invited you here, I thought kindness made people weak. I thought ordinary people existed for entertainment if you had enough money." Claire lowered her eyes briefly. Hearing the truth spoken aloud still hurt. Adrienne swallowed quietly before continuing. "Then I watched you protect a teenage musician nobody else noticed. I watched hotel staff smile when you thanked them. I watched powerful people become smaller, standing next to someone who expected nothing from them." His voice lowered slightly, and I realized the poorest person in that ballroom was me. Claire looked back at him slowly. The old Adrienne would never have admitted something like that publicly. Nearby guests had begun, quietly noticing the conversation now, though nobody interrupted. Adrian reached into his jacket pocket carefully and removed something small wrapped in black velvet. Claire's breath caught softly when he opened it. Inside rested a pair of worn silver heels dusted clean from melted snow. The same shoes she left on the sidewalk the night she walked away. "You kept those too?" Adrian nodded faintly. "To remind myself what kind of man I never want to become again." Claire stared at the shoes for a long second before unexpected laughter escaped her softly through the emotion building in her chest. "You carried around my shoes?" Adrian smiled for the first time all evening. Turns out humiliation is not as fun from the other side. Claire shook her head gently, fighting tears now. Around them, the ballroom had gone almost completely quiet. Even the musicians slowed their music as people discreetly watched from a respectful distance. Adrian looked at her carefully beneath the chandelier light. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight." Claire stayed silent. Adrian's voice softened. "And I'm not asking because I am rich or because I can build galleries and host events." He took one slow breath. "For the first time in my life, Claire, I want to deserve someone instead of impressing them." The honesty in his voice cracked through the last wall Claire had been holding on to since that snowy night outside her apartment. She looked around the ballroom one more time. Teachers laughing near her sketches. Eli, the violinist, performing quietly near the staircase now, confident and smiling. Hotel workers standing proudly beside wealthy donors as equals instead of servants. Adrian had not just apologized. He changed something, maybe even himself. Claire stepped closer slowly until only inches separated them beneath the warm lights. "You know," she said softly, "most people spend their whole lives pretending to change." Adrian searched her eyes carefully. "And me?" Claire smiled faintly through tears. "You actually did the hard part." Then before the entire ballroom could fully realize what was happening, Claire gently took Adrian's hand in hers. The room erupted into applause. Almost instantly. Real applause again. Warm, genuine, human. Adrian stared at her in disbelief while emotion flickered openly across his face for the first time in years. Claire laughed quietly at his expression. "Do not make me regret this, billionaire." Adrian shook his head softly, still holding her hand like something precious. Impossible. Snow continued falling outside the Beaumont Grand while music floated through the golden ballroom and guests returned slowly to conversation around them. But near the center gallery wall, beneath the soft lights and charcoal sketches of ordinary lives, Adrian Kensington finally understood something money could never buy. The girl he once invited into his world as a joke had become the only person capable of teaching him how to be human again.